Batman. Hello everybody, welcome to the Re-Review, the series where I get to replay and reassess games from my favourite gaming era. I'm Brian, also known as UK Jen Zoidberg, and I'm not Batman, although I have enjoyed being able to play the role in various video games for the best part of 40 years. In fact, there have probably been more Batman video games that I've played than any other superhero. There were even 3 of them on the Amiga. In today's episode, I'm going to take us all the way back to the year of Batmania, when Tim Burton's film lit up the cinemas and became the biggest hit of the year. Naturally, there was a video game adaptation too, so let's take a look at that game, see what the critical reception for it was, and whether it's worth playing today. Batman the movie was developed and published by Ocean Software in 1989. As I've mentioned a few times before on this series, Ocean Software were the biggest software publisher in the UK in the 1980s and 90s. Housed within their offices in central Manchester were a large team of talented programmers and artists, all working together producing arcade conversions and movie licenses for 8-bit and 16-bit systems. Michael Lamb may not be as well known as some of his colleagues from that time, but he worked on an impressive number of hit games after joining Ocean in 1986. He had started programming in BASIC on the Commodore PET in the early 80s before graduating to the ZX Spectrum. He applied for the job at Ocean after working on Steve Davis Snooker and the Joust clone Winged Warlords for publisher CDS. His first game at Ocean would be Top Gun for the Spectrum and Amstrad, and this proved that he was capable of bringing in a completed game within just 4 months. Released in time for Christmas 1986, the game went on to be a smash hit, selling over 500,000 copies in the US alone. That was nothing compared to what was to come in 1987. Lamb would work on 4 games that year, and every single one of them was a critical and commercial success. Arkanoid, Renegade and Combat School were all based on hit arcade machines, and every single one of them would receive 9 out of 10 in their reviews from Your Sinclair magazine. I even placed Renegade at number 4 on my own Spectrum Top 100 that I released last year, and I would honestly actually rather play that than the arcade original. Then came RoboCop. Based on the now iconic movie from Orion Pictures, this established the blueprint for which many other movie licenses would then follow. It included different types of gameplay across its levels, including a side-scrolling shooter section, a puzzle section, and crosshair shooting. Lamb would once again program the Spectrum and Amstrad versions, and the game would go on to be the biggest selling title in the UK for the whole of the 1980s. Target Renegade and Arkanoid Revenge of Doe would quickly follow, along with the Spectrum version of WEC Le Mans from Konami. Again, these were all huge successes. Then Ocean would grab the license to one of the biggest upcoming movies in the shape of Tim Burton's Batman. Lamb would devise the concept for the game, and just like RoboCop, it would feature 5 distinct levels. The first and last sections were action platform games, with driving, puzzle and flying making up the other 3. On the 8-bit systems, the driving and flying sections were side-on view, but for the Atari ST and Amiga, they drafted in programmer John O'Brien, who had made the Spectrum version of Chase HQ, to make more of an arcade racer. The game would also go on to be bundled with the A500 when Commodore released the Batman Pack, which also contained New Zealand Story and FA-18 Interceptor. This meant that for many players, this would be the first Amiga game they ever played. Lamb's final 2 games for Ocean were the Game Boy conversions of both RoboCop and Darkman, released in 1990. After leaving Ocean, he would move to America and work alongside developer Acme Interactive on Evander Holyfield's Real Deal Boxing and Greatest Heavyweights for the Sega Mega Drive. It was there that he met former Cinemaware artist Jeff Godfrey, and alongside John Brandwood, another ex-Ocean programmer, the 3 of them would set up Left Field Productions in 1994. They would produce a steady stream of basketball games starting with Slam & Jam 95 on the 3DO, but it would be NBA Courtside for the N64 that would eventually lead them to their biggest game. Working alongside Nintendo, they would produce Excitebike 64, which was released in 2000, and it would be praised for its 3D engine and physics. They began working on an N64 follow-up to 1080 Snowboarding, but left shortly after the development shifted to the GameCube and Nintendo took over the development for themselves. Left Field would then go on to make multiple games based on the World Series of Poker, as well as the excellent racing games MTX Motor Tracks and Nitro Bike, which were published by Activision and Ubisoft respectively. Their final game before going out of business was the monochrome racing game Mayhem, which was made for the Xbox 360 and PS3, although only the PS3 would actually get released in the UK. Now though, let's go back to 1989 and see what the critics made of Batman upon its original release. Over the years, I've found that there is a quirk in games reviews which I have dubbed the edge effect. This is where the same game would be reviewed on multiple systems, but always receive a higher score on whatever the more modern technology is. It happens all the time in Edge magazine, and I think it also happened with Batman. There's a difference between the reception that the game got in the multi-format magazines to the one that it received in the specialist Amiga press. Take Zap magazine for instance. They reviewed the Commodore 64 version in their October 1989 issue, where they awarded it a score of 96%. The following issue, they reviewed the Amiga version, and even though it's pretty much the same game, they awarded it 1 point more at 97%. Likewise, in the Games Machine, they reviewed all versions at once, awarding the 8-bit versions 95 and the 16-bit versions 96. Compare this with both Amiga Action and The One, who also published their reviews in November. In both magazines, they stated that it was one of the best movie licenses that they had ever played, and they were full of praise for the driving section. However, they only deemed the game overall worthy of a score of 82%. Ultimately, the lowest score that it would receive in a multi-format magazine was 86% from 0, whereas the highest score that it got from an Amiga magazine was 90% from Amiga format. From the 9 reviews that I found in UK publications, Batman earned a very impressive average of 89.7%, with all of the highest scores coming from multi-format magazines. On the Lemon Amiga website, it currently has a user score of 7.52 from over 250 reviews, and the score on Moby Games for the Amiga version is 7.7. Now though, it's time for the playtest. Let's load the game up and see what I think of it. I think for many people this would have been the first game that they ever played on the Amiga because of the Batman pack. So as was pretty common at the time this came out, especially with movie licenses, this is a game that has multiple different types of game. Enemies will always appear from the same place. Just make your way through in as quick a time as possible. Your little health bar at the bottom of the screen will slowly turn into the Joker. Being able to jump downwards through the platforms rather than have to climb down the ladders is definitely advisable. Unlike the Commodore 64 version, you can actually use your grappling hook to take out enemies. But I'm not a massive fan of these levels, I must admit. I don't know because I expected more from a 16-bit game. This is still very much the same game that is on the Spectrum and Commodore 64, just with better graphics. Even though a minute ago I just criticised the game for being the same game that's on the Commodore 64, just with slightly better graphics, they have done a pretty decent job of upgrading those. But this is the reason why I don't like it as much as many other people, because of how far it sends you back when you die. I'm not a very big fan of repetition in gaming. Play through a section that I've effectively already played through again and again and again just to get a tiny bit further is not my idea of fun. That guy in the green coat definitely looks a bit like the henchman Bob from the movie. I mean, when you consider how poor some movie games were on the Amiga, then this is definitely the higher tier of quality. As we now get to drive the Batmobile along the streets of Gotham. And what you have to bear in mind here is that this is produced by Ocean Software in the same year that they did the woeful conversion of Chase HQ. You have to use the grappling hook to go around the corners so that you avoid the police roadblocks. But it's really, really fun to play. It's got a fantastic sense of speed. if there was more of this kind of thing in the game, I would probably like it a lot more than I do. It is a shame that I have to play this by pushing up on the joystick, and even if I plug in a joypad, I can't program it in. But I do think that this section puts many Amiga racing games to absolute shame. I mean, it's incredibly simple. It is just avoid the other cars until that distance meter in the top right hand corner reaches 0. But it is so much fun. And the game's designers could have absolutely ruined this by making connecting your grappling hook to be a lot more complicated than it actually is. So I would actually commend them for making it as easy and enjoyable as it is. It's very, very hard to fault this section of the game at all. And like I said before, it just makes me weep a little bit more every time I find myself having to play the Amiga version of Chase HQ. And so when you manage to complete the driving section, you're whisked away to the middle section of the game, which is a bit of a puzzle game. It's a bit like Mastermind. So the yellow one is definitely in there. Unless it's the blue one. No, right, so the blue one is... There's 2 of them in that one. So that one, that one, that one. No. Is it that you just have to get 3, or do you have to get them in the right place? You have to get them in the right place. So try that one first, then that one, then that one. No. Hey! Did it, somehow. So then for the 4th section, you get to fly the Batwing in a level that's very similar graphically to the racing section. So basically, all you have to do is get the metal chain chopped in 2 with the front of your Batwing to let the balloons sail away. You can speed up by holding down the fire button and pushing up on the joystick. So it still looks as great as the racing section, but I think it's a lot less enjoyable. You see, I've still got 55 balloons left to get and just over a minute in which to do it. So 28, I've got 30 seconds left. I don't think I'm going to do it. So it didn't send me all the way back to the start, but it's still a lot of repetition. I think this section looks nice and is quite fun to play, but a few more obstacles and a few less balloons to actually cut would probably make it more enjoyable. So then for the final level, you are required to ascend to the top of Gotham City Cathedral for your final confrontation with the Joker. And the level is very, very similar to the opening level in the chemical plant. Only significantly harder, it would seem. Which will no doubt make it more frustrating. Oh, and there are now collapsible platforms. So if you didn't really like the opening section, you're not really going to like this one either. So I think that's probably a good place to end the playtest and move on to the final summary. According to Mike Lamb himself in this book, the 16-bit versions of Batman are average at best, and I honestly think that that's not quite the whole story. The trouble with movie licenses of this type is that they are invariably a mixed bag, and that's definitely the case with Batman the movie, although I certainly think that the quality here is higher than most. This is easily a better game than some of Ocean's other titles like Terminator 2 or The Untouchables. The standout section is unquestionably the driving section, which is fast, exciting and challenging in the best possible way. It eclipses many Amiga racing games of the time, and I would be happy to just sit and play this section on its own. Using the grappling hook to take 90-degree corners will never not be fun. I wish that I could say the same thing about the platforming sections. These are exactly the same as their equivalent levels on the 8-bit systems, just with admittedly much better graphics. It can be fun learning the layouts and where all of the enemies appear from, but I found that it's often too difficult to avoid taking damage. And if you do fail, the checkpoints are so spread out that repetition soon sets in. I also definitely enjoyed the Axis chemical levels far more than the Cathedral, as the collapsing platforms of the latter are really annoying. The last two sections are the least memorable in the game. Flying the Batwing is initially quite fun, and it looks great because it uses the same graphical engine as the driving, but the level drags on, and ultimately it becomes very tedious before too long. The puzzle section in the middle is so inconsequential that it ends up being pointless. It would have been much better off as a bonus game rather than a full-blown level. The presentation of the game is overall of a very high standard across all the stages, with some impressive sprites and backgrounds. The music by Jonathan Dunn and Matthew Cannon is also decent, with an excellent theme tune on the main menu packed with samples, and the background music as you play doesn't overwhelm the gameplay. When I made my Retro Game Super League videos a couple of years ago about movie games on the Amiga, I placed Batman at the top of what would now be considered the bronze tier. Looking back at that now, I think I was probably slightly harsh, as there are definitely sections here that I find very enjoyable. I do really like the opening level and the driving sections, although I find the rest of the game is a real mixed bag, ranging from frustrating to tedious to pointless. And for that reason, I'm going to give it a silver medal and a score of 7 out of 10. That's it for another episode of the re-review. Please make sure to give us a like and subscribe if you have enjoyed it. Whether you agree or disagree with my assessment of Batman the movie, I would love to hear your opinions of the game in the comments. Starting from May the 25th, you will be able to watch 2 videos on the channel rather than just one, and that will kick off with my long gestating top 100 best games of all time. Part 1 of that countdown will be available on Monday at noon, so make sure you hit that notification bell so that you don't miss out. You can watch many of our videos earlier than everybody else by simply becoming a VIP member of the channel, and that costs just £1.99 a month. All the details of how you can do that are in the video description, along with the links to all of our social channels, like our Discord. Thank you very much for watching this video, and until next time, happy retro gaming everybody. Bye for now.